Hello, welcome to White Davy Gardening and Worm Farm. How are you guys doing? So, thank you guys for being here on this live, for participating in the discussion. I hope that you will feel free to share your experiences with worm farming and what you like about it, what you don't like about it, and the benefits that you have had regarding worm farming. So, now we are going to be discussing what it is that you like about worm farming. Now that I have discovered worm farming, I really cannot see myself gardening without it. Yes, there have been so many different benefits that I've had from it that to go back to any other form of fertilizing my garden would be like going backwards, really, because I don't really think there is anything that can be compared to worm castings and the various benefits. There are so many different type of organic fertilizers out there, whether it is man-made or created naturally by the creator. But so far, I don't really see anything that can top the worm castings. Hi, Cece. How are you, my dear? Yes. So I don't see anything so far. I'm not saying that worm casting is the best, but it is the best I've seen so far. So there might be other types of fertilizers that are better than worm casting, but I'm yet to discover it. Yeah, so I like the fact that I can actually add it to my garden as often as I like and it doesn't harm my plants. For example, because it has so many benefits, I have it if I use it as a fertilizer and then I notice that I'm having issues with pests, I can always use the worm tea to repel these pests without worrying that the I'm adding too much of the castings to the garden and it's going to harm my plants. Yes, I don't have to be worrying about it harming the plants or over fertilizing the garden. So that is one of the reasons why I like worm farming. I also like that it can be used to treat some plant pathogens. That is quite good because then if you are someone who have access to worm casting, whether you produce your own or you have to purchase it or you can source it from a friend, then you don't have to be buying other substances or chemicals to treat pathogens in your garden, depending on the type of pathogens, of course, because the worm casting is not going to be able to treat every kind of issue that you faced in the garden. But I like the fact that you don't really have to go and buy chemicals to treat every type of pathogen that you come across because the worm tea is able to take care of some of them or the worm castings. So, what do you guys like about worm farming and worm castings? Like I said before, the benefits of worm casting is pretty much very extensive. A lot of other organic matter provide similar benefits, but some of them might not be the best treatment for your issues that you're having in your garden. Some of them might be almost as good. But the good thing about the worm, oh, hi, Han White. The good thing about the worm casting is that it has no additive in it. It is just pure worm casting. So you don't have to worry about harmful chemicals being it or anything of the sort. And one of the good things that I like about worm farming is that when you do composting, regular composting, it breaks down and give you a nice rich compost. But then if the compost contains certain unwanted chemicals or metals, heavy metals in it, then that will remain after the composting process has come to an end. But then if you do vermicomposting, the worms will actually break down some of these harmful chemicals and heavy metal that is in the material you're composting, so that you will have a nice, healthy, clean castings to use in your garden. Let's see. And White says she likes the castings. Okay. Yes, the casting is quite good. So I'm going to be sharing some of the things that I like about the worm castings, and I hope you guys feel free to share what it is that you like about it too. Yes, so as I was saying, I like that it can treat pathogens. I like that the worms can break down some of the harmful substances that can be found in the material that we are composting. Oh, hi Khadija. How are you? It's been a while. How is your garden doing? Yes, so let's talk about something, a substance that is found in worm casting that has a really nice benefit for the garden, and that is called chitinase. Now, chitinase acts as a pest repellent and it is found naturally in worm castings. Now, what I like about this and the reason why it is effective as a pest repellent is because most insects, some fungi, and algae contains what is known as chitin. And the chitin for insects, it is found in their exoskeleton. Chitinase that is found in worm castings, it breaks down the chitin that is in the exoskeleton of these insects. And because of that, it will actually lead to the death of these insects that are pests in our garden. So that is one of the benefits why worm casting is so good, because it will actually harm pests that are in your garden. Let's see. Okay, garden doing great. It's very hot, feels like 101. Wow. Yeah, that's hot. Well, that's good that the garden is still doing great despite the fact that it is so hot. It has been a pretty hot summer so far. So I'm not really expecting as much as I usually would from my garden. Even though the garden looks nice, I'm not really expecting as much as I normally would, because with all the heat that we've been having, it is affecting so many different the plants in so many different ways. Even the blossoms that are on the plants, it gets hot and the blossoms just dry down and fall off. So I'm not really expecting a lot of produce from my peppers and tomatoes. Yeah, or my cucumbers for that matter. But it's still going, so I guess I can't complain. I still have been harvesting, so I won't complain too much. I will complain, but not too much. Hi, Mom. Hi, Melanie. Okay, it's good, not great. Okay. Some things have dried up. Lots of hornworm. Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. It has been quite crazy. Yeah. I have to be, usually I water my garden maybe once or twice per week. I have to water my garden literally every single day. Even with the worm casting and the benefit of it helping the plants not to dry out. Mark, you though, having worm casting in my garden has saved me a few times when a day might pass when I don't get to water the garden. I can see the difference in the plants, but at least the garden is not fully dried out. So Yes, it has been it has been pretty crazy with the garden, and the plants are just struggling to grow. Hopefully next year the garden season will be a whole lot better. I agree with you. As long as you're getting things from, you're able to harvest from the garden, you're actually succeeding. So true. Yes. So as I was saying, the chitinase that is found in the worm castings can act as a pest repellent. So whether it is fungal infection, algae infection in your plants, or some pests, the chitinase can actually help with that. And then the casting contain another substance that is called auxin, and this is actually a growth hormone, which is very good for the plants, and especially in times like these when we are experiencing so many different weather conditions in the garden, and especially with the heat and drying out of the plants and with all the pests that we have to deal with. Sometimes the pests cause plants to be stunted so they don't grow as they normally would. So when you have add worm castings to your garden, the auxin that is in it, that growth hormone, will help the plants to continue to grow despite the damages that pests are causing. But not only does it help your plants to grow, what I like about it too is that it helps with the amount that you're able to harvest from your garden. So it increases your yield, and it also increases the flavor of whatever it is that you are growing. And with all that we have been doing as humans that have been damaging the soil, damaging the environment, it has had a lasting effect on our gardens. And so we have gotten accustomed to the various tastes from the foods that we eat, but the taste that we're getting from foods now is not what was originally intended. But with all that we have been doing, we have been damaging, harming the food, so we don't get the actual taste that we should from it. When you use worm casting, it will not bring it back to perfection, mark you, but when you use worm casting in your garden, it is able to enhance the flavor of whatever it is that you are growing. Now, sometimes we might complain that the casting change the flavor of whatever it is that we're growing because we have gotten so used to the taste. So we might complain that it changed the way it tastes, but I think it is for the better. But you know how it is when you're used to something, if you try something else, you might not like it. Yeah, for example, my daughter, she was not born in Jamaica, the younger one. So she's accustomed to eating mangoes here in Canada. And the mangoes that we get here, the only, unless it comes from places like Jamaica and some tropical places, the only word that I can use to describe the mangoes that we get here and some of the other fruits is pathetic. Because I'm used to mangoes and certain fruits having a nice, rich flavor. For example, if I go to the store now and I buy a mango or buy a pineapple or whatever fruit it is, if I come and I put it in the house and it is ripe, you cannot know the fruit is in the house. That is the fruit that I buy here. If you're in Jamaica and you have just one single mango or one single pineapple or whatever fruit in your house, as long as it is ripe, you know that it is there. You can actually smell it already. And smelling is a big part of enjoying the fruits that we eat. But as I was saying, my daughter, she's so accustomed to the flavors that she's getting here now that when you actually give her a mango or a pineapple that comes directly from Jamaica or other tropical areas, she cannot really appreciate it as much because she's gotten so used to the flavors here. So just saying that to say that sometimes the castings will enhance the flavor, but if sometimes for some of us we might not really like the difference because we've gotten used to eating our fruits and our vegetables taste in a particular way. But yes, worm casting, the auxin in the worm casting does help to enhance the flavor and the production. So, what is it that you guys like about worm farming? That's what we're discussing today. What is it that you like about worm farming? What is it that you like about using worm castings in your garden? Let's see. Uh, a healthy home says they say people actually prefer organic juice from concentrate versus fresh for this reason. Yes, so true. That is so true. So true. Yes. So another thing that I like about the worm casting is that it acts as a buffer for plants where the pH in the soil is unbalanced. Yeah, so that is one other benefit of the worm casting. Let's see. Your healthy home says don't have to worry about burning plants or putting too much. Yes, I was going to touch on that point too. Oh, yes, I didn't even remember to mention that point where it doesn't smell. So it doesn't burn plants, and you cannot add too much of it to your garden, as Her Healthy Home says. And it doesn't carry a foul odor. Some organic fertilizers may carry odors that we may or may not like. Worm castings tend to have more of an earthy smell. Of course, there are occasions when worm castings might have a less than ideal smell if something has gone wrong with it. For example, if it has, during the process of it being made, it has gone anaerobic, then it might carry an odor, but in general, it does not carry an odor apart from just an earthy smell. Yes. Another thing is that it can hold, they say, based on researchers, some say it can hold 2 to 3 times its weight in water. Some say it can hold up to 9 times its weight in water. Of course, it might depend on each researcher's experience or the result that they get from their experiments. But it is said that it can hold anything up to 9 times its weight in water, which is pretty good because if you have a lot of worm castings. For this reason, you can add a lot of it to your garden because it's going to help you to control the amount of water that you have to give your plants. Yeah, so having a lot of worm casting in your garden does help. Speaking of which, maybe I should add a little bit more to my garden since as I have to be watering daily with all the heat wave and everything else and the strong winds that we've been having. We've had, was it yesterday? It was so windy that practically half of the apples on my trees fell off. It was pretty windy, and that also helps with drying out the soil. So, having a lot of worm casting in your garden will help with retaining some of the moisture. And then another thing is the fluffiness of the worm casting. It feels nice when you hold it in with your bare hand. It's just nice and fluffy. But that fluffiness allows it to be good at aerating your garden because it allows good airflow through the soil when you mix it into your soil. So that is one good reason why it is so important that you don't allow your worm castings to dry out when you're storing it because you want to have that fluffiness because it's going to help with aeration in your garden and it's going to also help with the moisture, the amount of moisture that it can hold. So if you allow the worm castings to dry out too much, it's going to restrict the amount of moisture. And once the casting has dried out to an extent, that level of fluffiness, you cannot regain it. No matter what you do with the castings, you will not be able to regain that level of fluffiness. So when you're storing your castings, just ensure that you don't allow it to dry out fully. And it is also a good idea to pay close attention to the packaging when you're buying worm castings, because if those worm castings have been parceled and put on the shelves for a really long time, depending on how it has been packaged, it can dry out more than you'd like. Of course, as I mentioned before in previous lives, it still will have all the nutrients that it originally had before it dried out, but the level of microbes that you're going to have and other beneficial insects, the level is going to be drastically reduced if you allow the castings to dry out. So it's not really a good idea to buy worm castings. Depending on the type of packaging, you want to pay close attention to that. And if it has an expiry date, pay close attention to that as well. Yes, it is still good if it dries out and white. It is still good. It's just that it won't have the amount of microbes in it that is beneficial for your soil. And we're going to be discussing a little bit more about these microbes that can be found in the worm castings and the benefits of them. Yeah, so another thing that I actually like about the worm casting is that it forms soil aggregates, and thus it will prevent the soil from eroding or from becoming too compacted, thus again helping with aeration. So when the castings help to form soil aggregates, it helps the root to have a stronger hold. So in case of strong winds, your plant will not be able to turn over as quickly as when you don't really have the worm casting in there. And also it also help with the maintaining of your soil, so you don't have to be replacing your soil regularly when soil gets eroded, because the casting will help to prevent that to an extent. It won't fully prevent it, but it will help to some extent to prevent the soil erosion. Now, another benefit that I really like about the worm casting is that it protects the surface of the seeds, and so it will help to prevent your seeds from getting infected. And it also shorten the germination cycle. So when you use worm casting in your potting mix, it will help your seeds to germinate much faster. Now, some worm casting is just streaming with lots and lots of beneficial microbes. Now, these microbes include things like nematodes, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and flagellates. So these are all classified as microbes. Now, nematodes, you can have good nematodes and you can have bad nematodes. The bad nematodes, they tend to affect, depending on the type, they tend to affect pretty much every part of the plant. So they may damage the root of your plants. They may go into the tissue of the plant. They may affect the stems of the plant, the foliage, the flowers, etc. So nematodes can affect pretty much all of your plants, and they can even go as far as to decimate your entire crop. Now, the good nematode, on the other hand, these enrich your soil by feeding on the bad nematodes. They feed on pests that are in your garden. They feed on decaying matter, on bacteria and fungi as well. So the good nematodes will help to control the bad ones that are in your garden. Now, bacteria and fungi in your garden, these are actually the primary compost decomposers in your garden, and so they are very vital for both your plant health and for your soil health. They can also help to fight help the plant, sorry, to develop strong, healthy roots and to fight off things like pests and diseases. So, as I mentioned before, the insects have their exoskeleton with the chitin in it, and then the chitinase that is found in the castings will dissolve their exoskeleton. So that is how it acts as a as a pesticide and help you to control these insects when they are in your garden. Now, the protozoa and the flagellates, these eat bacteria and fungi that are found in your soil, and then the nutrients that is in these bacteria and fungi will get released back into the soil so that the plants can readily absorb it. Worm tea also is another perfect way of using casting, and especially if you have a hydroponic garden, using worm tea is very effective. And what I like about it for the hydroponic garden is that once you are producing your own worm tea or your own worm castings, then you don't really have to buy other solutions to use to provide nutrients for your hydroponic garden. All you need is pretty much the worm tea, and that will provide enough nutrients for your plants. So for me, I just love worm farming because it makes my compost so much better. Because, as most of you know, when I just started composting, the reason why I get into composting, vermicomposting, is because in my region it is so cold. It takes up to a year before I'm able to harvest compost, and my growing season is only 3 months. So, if I am to start my compost just before the growing season start, I won't have any compost to use. So I decided to do vermicomposting because then the worms can process the food scraps so much faster. But not only are they providing me with this compost at a faster rate, but the castings provide even more benefits than just the regular compost, because you've seen or you've heard what have the list of things that I've discussed just now that I enjoy about worm castings. Some of these benefits can be found in regular compost, some of them not. And for those that can be found in regular compost, the volume of benefits that you get from it is not the same as what you get from the worm castings, because worm castings can have up to 20 times more nutrients than regular compost. So for this reason, I really do enjoy worm castings or worm farming. Not to, so it saved me time from having to wait a full year for my compost to break down. The value of the casting is so much more than the regular compost. It saved me the expense of having to buy in organic fertilizers often because I'm making my own. And then it helped to reduce the waste that I am putting in the landfill. So for these reasons, I really do like worm farming. And then I don't have to be buying a lot of different, what would I call it now? Whether organic or otherwise, chemicals to treat pests and stuff like that. I still have to do buy substances, other chemicals and stuff. Well, I don't know if I would call the organic matter chemicals, but I still have to buy some material to treat pests, because worm casting and worm tea will not treat every type of pest. But then having the worm casting, it reduces the amount of material that I would have to buy in order to help to control pests. So that is pretty good. So that is why I really enjoy worm castings and worm farming, and that is why I keep on encouraging others to get involved in worm farming, because the benefit of it is definitely worth the effort. Right, so this is all that I have prepared to discuss with you guys today. If there's anything else that you'd like to discuss, or if you have any questions, Feel free to ask your questions or discuss the benefits that you have had from using worm worm castings in your garden. I definitely was saved. My garden definitely was saved this year because of me having the worm castings. If I didn't have the worm farm, I don't really know what would have happened to my garden with all the different pests that I've had to deal with and the damages that they have caused to my garden. Mark you, the worm tea has not gotten rid of all the problems from pests, but at least it helped me to kind of get it under control, and helped me also because I'm still able to harvest fruits and vegetables. I had an issue with white flies, and all I did is one treatment, just one treatment with worm tea, and I haven't seen the white flies after that. So the worm tea worked pretty well with that. And then a lot of my plants, they just constantly, because of there's so many different pests that I've had this year, the plants just not looking as vital or as lively as they used to. The leaves start quailing down and they just don't look vibrant. But using the worm castings, every now and then you'd see that the plants are actually perking up. And even with the, what's that called? Leaf hoppers and the curly top virus that they cause, because the worm tea and the worm casting does not over fertilize your plants and doesn't burn your plant. So I'm able to constantly treat the plants for these damages using the worm casting and the worm tea and see where the plants are actually doing a whole lot better. Yes, so if it was some other form of fertilizer that helps to control pests and pathogens and stuff like that, I would have to be worrying about them burning my plants and stuff like that. But because the worm casting does not harm the plant, so I can just keep on adding it every week to my plants to give it that extra boost to combat all the damages that the pests are causing. So that makes a world of difference to my plants. Otherwise, I don't know what I would have done with all these damages that the plants have to suffer. Let's see, and White says, the leaf hoppers are having a great time in my garden, and the caterpillars as well. Okay, yes. It is, it's sad that you have to be dealing with these leaf hoppers. They're quite terrible. It's the first time I'm actually experiencing them. Never even seen them before. I've heard of them, but I've never seen them before. But this year, unfortunately, it's as if, well, I guess it's my fault because I saw the little things and because I wasn't seeing the damage right away, I didn't really realize that they were actually a foe of the garden. So I didn't really do anything about them. I was just watching to see if they're friends or foe. But I guess I waited too long and then they were all over the garden. But once the damage is done, especially you can treat the symptoms of some of the damages that they do, but you cannot get rid of the curly top virus once it has affected the plant. So again, that's another benefit of using the worm casting because it is helping the plant to fight back even though it won't fully recover. Let's see. Hi Kisor. Say yes, my worm bin is full of small ant-sized flies. How do I get rid of it? Is it harmful to the worms? Okay, so you have flies in your worm bin. The flies are not necessarily harmful to the worm bin. They're actually the maggots of the flies are actually good composters. So they're not harmful to your worms, but then no one wants to deal with flies. They can be annoying. And depending on the type of flies that you have too, because some of them, if it is fungus gnat that looks like a fly but not necessarily is a fly, if that's what you have, then the if you're using your worm casting for seedlings and stuff like that, or for a little indoor garden, it can be damaging because the larvae of the fungus gnat will feed on the root of your plants, and that will destroy your plants. So if the fly-like creatures that you're having is fungus gnat, then you definitely need to get rid of them. You can use fly traps like those yellow sticky tape to help to control the flies. You can set traps like using vinegar, put it in a container, cover it over with a plastic, and just have some tiny holes in it. The flies are attracted to the sour smell of the vinegar, so they will go in, but because the holes in the plastic is very small, it is difficult for them to come out, and then they will either drown or they will stay in the in the container with the solution and eventually die. So you can use that. But if you're going to be using that vinegar solution, do not put it in the worm bin. Just put it on the outside, close to the worm bin, and that will attract them away from the worm farm. The next thing that you can do is to keep your worm bin covered. So sometimes it's necessary for you to open your worm bin because you have to let air flow through the bin. So what you want to do then is make sure that the cover that you're using has enough holes in it, but then use, whether it is a thin sheet, or you can use even an old t-shirt or something of the sort that allows airflow to cover your bin. And if you have holes in your bin, then you might want to get those covered with something that allows airflow. Just a minute, I'm gonna see if I can show you what I mean by getting the holes covered. You can use various methods, but I'm gonna get one of my bins and show you. Okay, so this is one of my little experimental bins, and this one I keep in the house. If you look here, you notice that I have window screen that I glued over the holes because that is going to keep flies out of the bin. If the cover of your bin is not one that fits tight on the bin, then the flies can get in there and other pests can get in there. So you can use an old t-shirt to cover over the bin, but you want to make sure that the old t-shirt is secured to the bin so that the flies won't find any area to get in. You can also get like the window screen and create a cover that fits snugly around the bin, and that will help. Or you can use just an old sheet or an old thin curtain, anything of the sort, as long as it is small enough to keep the flies out. And another thing that you can do too is to bury the food scraps that you are feeding your worms, because flies can smell the food scraps from miles away, literally from miles away. So keeping the food scraps buried as much as possible will also help to control the smell that is going to attract them. Let's see. And White says, I never seen them before too. I had to cut down a few of my herbs to spring again. I saw them too and didn't know what they were. Yes, that's the sad thing about these pests sometimes, because you see the creatures in your garden, and most times the creatures or the insects that we see in our garden, most of them are actually beneficial to the garden. It's only a small amount that isn't. So when we see them and we don't really know what they are, our first reaction is to do nothing because we don't want to take action, and then we find out that it was something beneficial to the garden. So for that reason, sometimes we tend to wait, and then unfortunately, when we start to see damages, sometimes it is too late. Yes. But the good thing is that sometimes you will start to see damage fast enough where you can actually get it under control. Yes, but this year I didn't react fast enough, so my entire garden is suffering because of that. But I guess it's always a learning process. There is just so much to learn about gardening. You can never know everything there is to know about gardening because there's always new pests being found. There is always new pathogens being discovered. So you cannot be fully prepared no matter what you do. But at least the good idea is to keep in mind that there's gonna be friends and foes to the garden and just be on the lookout for these, and that will make a difference in how fast you can react whenever there is an issue. Let's see. Okay, your healthy home, I'm glad that you were able to take part in the live as well. Have a lovely day. Let's see. Kishore said, can you tell the spelling of the fly like fungus thing? Okay, it is GNAT for the fungus gnat. So the knot is GNAT. They look like little flies. They look like fruit flies. They are black or dark gray. Look like the fruit flies, but they do fly, but they don't fly far. They tend to jump more than how they fly. So when you go after a fruit fly, it will just fly away. The fungus gnat, they don't necessarily fly away. They will just jump a little distance away, and they're much slower than the fruit flies, but they reproduce at a very fast rate, and they can be very harmful to your plants if you have them around, especially for young plants. They can be pretty harmful. And if you have them in your worm castings and you're using your worm castings for seed germination, then what you're going to find is their larvae is going to be a little less than a quarter inch long. They tend to have a dark silverish color. So it's easy for them to blend in with the soil and you not noticing that they are there. So for the larvae, the fungus gnat itself doesn't really damage the plant so much. It is the larvae that lives in the soil and do the damage. Now these fungus gnats, they tend to love moist environment. And so it is recommended if you know that you have them in your castings, ensure that your seedlings, you bottom water them. But from my experience, I've been bottom watering my plants, but I still end up with fungus gnats this year, destroying quite a lot of my seedlings, even though I'm bottom watering. So, but at least when you bottom water, it reduces the amount of them that you will have. And if you find that you have that issue, I'd recommend that you change that potting soil out completely. Don't even think about using it. Change it out completely and use something else, because otherwise it's only gonna cause more harm to your plant. Of course, that soil you can always sterilize it with some hot water to destroy the fungus gnat in there. That is going to destroy the beneficial life form in there, but then you can add more castings to it afterwards to revitalize the soil. Let's see. Petal on the paving slabs. Hi, how are you? You say it makes you itchy talking about fruit flies and fungus gnats. Yes, they are creepy, and especially when you have them in large amount. So last, well, that could be last year. Well, I started last year with plants that I intended to grow this year. So my sweet potatoes and my Scotch bonnet peppers, I started them in October and November of last year, December. So I had quite an issue with the fungus gnats this year with my seedlings. And so what I have decided to do, I purchased myself some screen, some of those window screen, because I might be moving some of my plants back indoors because my growing season is close to its end. So I might be moving my herbs and plants that I would like to overwinter indoors, whether it's going to be in my garden or in the house. But what I have done now is purchase the window screen because I'm going to be using the window screen to create a framing that I can keep my plants under, because doing that is going to help to reduce the amount of pests that can actually get in there. So that is one of the projects that I am working on at the moment. But I made sure that the one that I purchased, the screen that I purchased, is not the black one this time. I went with the white. And the reasoning behind that is, if I'm going to be keeping it indoors, I'm going to be having it on my windowsill or on my garden stand that is by the windowsill. So I want to ensure that it is not blocking out the light. So for that reason, I went with the white. Let's see. Petals says, good tip about bottom watering. Thank you. Okay, you're very welcome. Bottom watering will prevent the top of your soil from being moist. As I said before, the fungus knots tend to like the moist environment. So having the top of of your containers dry will help to, it will not attract them as much. And another thing that you can do, because like I mentioned before, even though I was bottom watering some of my plants, I noticed that I still end up with fungus knots in there. And I think it is because I had the fungus knot in the plants that I was top watering. So they were able to just move over to those that I was bottom watering. So one of the things that you can do in addition to bottom watering your plants is to get yourself some diatomaceous earth. Keep the top of your potting soil dry, and then just sprinkle the diatomaceous earth, especially around the edges of the container where the soil touches the container, because that is the section where the fungus knots and the fruit flies tend to go down into the soil through. So just sprinkle the diatomaceous earth on top, because the diatomaceous earth will cut through their waxy exoskeleton and dehydrate them and lead to their death. So having diatomaceous earth is a good idea as well. Let's see, Kishore says, can I dry those fungus knot worm casting to direct sun to kill them? You can, I don't really know if that is going to kill the excuse me. I don't know if the sunlight is going to kill the fungus knot. If you allow it to dry out, yes, definitely, whether the sun or otherwise, as long as it is allowed to dry fully, it will kill them. But the only thing is the castings, if you dry it out, then it's going to kill off the microbe, the beneficial microbes that is in the castings, and you won't be able to revitalize the castings. It will still have its nutrients, as I mentioned before, but you won't be able to revitalize the castings, nor will you be able to get back that level of fluffiness, which is very good for the aerating of your soil and for retaining a good amount of moisture. So you won't be able to revitalize that aspect of it, but it will still be able to maintain all of the nutrients in it. Yes. Yeah, so the casting, but pretty much if your casting is already having issues with the fungus not being in it, you can dry it out to an extent. Don't allow it to dry fully. The good thing about worm casting is that the level of moisture that you would need to have in your worm bin for your worms, you don't need to have that level of moisture in your castings. Your castings just need to be slightly damp, just slightly moist. That is enough moisture to maintain all of the beneficial microbes that are in your casting. So you can dry it out to an extent where it is just barely damp, but not fully dry. And then what you could do to get rid of those fungus knots that are in there is to add the worm, the not the worm casting, but the diatomaceous earth to it. Yes, so adding the diatomaceous earth, mix it in with it, that will help to control them. The downside of diatomaceous earth is that it is made of rock particles, which means that it is not dissolvable, but once it gets wet, it is not as effective as when it is dry. Right, so it won't be, if it is wet, it won't be as effective. But once it is dry, so if it gets wet, it's fine. Once it dries out, the one that got wet, you can allow it to dry out. And once it dries out, it will maintain or regain its level of effectiveness. Yes, so you can either mix it in with the castings or you can just put it on the surface of the castings. And aerating your castings, if it has the fungus knot in it, is also a good way of helping to control the fungus knot as well, because they like to go down into the soil where it is nice and moist. On the top tends to be drier, so stirring your soil occasionally will bring them up to the surface. And then once they come up to the surface, and if that is where you added the diatomaceous earth, once they come in contact with the diatomaceous earth, even if you see them flying away, crawling away, or whatever the case may be, once the fungus knots come in contact with the dry diatomaceous earth, it is going to be damaging their waxy exoskeleton. So the damage is already done to them, so you don't need to worry that they are escaping. What you need to worry about, though, is to ensure that you do not have a circumstance that is going to encourage these fungus knot to new fungus knots to keep coming into that casting and reinfecting it. Hi, Russell. Let's see. You said you clean out your red wiggler bin this week and added 1 tablespoon of BTI to it. Okay, yes. So that is another way. Thanks, Russell. That is another way that you can help to control the fungus knots in your worm casting or in your worm bin by adding the BTI to it. Thanks for that reminder. How are things with you, Russell, and that water damage that you sustained? Yes, I just need to jot down something that I remembered. Let's see. Russell says to unused worm casting tea, let shredded newspaper soak overnight, squeezer. Do not expect fungus knots or fruit flies. Okay, good. Excuse me. Let's see. Kishore says, do worm cast cause root rot due to presence of fungi? If so, how to kill those? Worm casting does not cause root rot. In fact, the worm casting helps to develop strong, healthy roots because of the growth hormones that are in it, and because of the what is it? Because of the bacteria and the fungi that are present in your worm castings. The bad bacteria and the bad fungi that can be found in your soil gets taken care of by the nematodes that can be found in the protozoa, the flagellates, and the nematodes will take care of the bad fungi and bacteria that can be found in your soil, especially around the roots of your plants. So these will take care of that. So you need not worry about that. The worm casting, however, does not harm the roots of your plants. It will enhance the root of your plants because of the good bacteria and the good nematodes and those that can be found in the worm castings. And this is one of the reasons why it is so important not to let your worm casting dry out, because those beneficial bacteria and fungi, the various types of microbes that can be found in worm castings, if you allow your castings to dry out, then they are going to die. And these are what is actually protecting the roots of your plants from these bad bacteria and fungi. So that is why it is important not to allow your castings to dry out when you're storing it. Right. So if you notice that your plants are having issues with fungi and bacteria, it would mean that it is the bad bacteria or the bad fungi. So just simply add worm tea or worm casting to the plant, and that will help to get that problem under control. You're very welcome. Okay, so if there are no more questions, then I'm going to be saying goodbye to you guys. It was a really great discussion. I enjoy your input, and thank you guys for those of you who were sharing your experience with your worm farming and all. Let's see. Russell says, along with the food scraps, I top feed them with worm chow and lightly spray the chow with water that has BTI floating in it. Okay, that's a good idea. Never thought of doing it that way. I do not have the flying insects in my worm bins. Oh, see, that's pretty good. Thank you for that information. I never thought about putting the BTI in the water I'm using to wet the bin. I'm gonna be doing that as of now. Nice. Yes, so now I'm going to be putting the using the BTI for that reason as well. But thanks for sharing that information, Russell. So that's another option that you can use, Kishore. Okay, let's see. Put the mosquito dunks in your 55-gallon barrel. Okay, I don't have any. You can actually get mosquito dunk to buy. I don't really know anything about the mosquito dunks. Oh, that's one more thing that I need to research then. Oh, come to think of it, I think I recall you mentioning something about the mosquito dung in times past, and I was supposed to do some research on it, but I never got around to it. There's so many things I need to research, but haven't gotten around to it yet, so I'm going to have to get on that one. Okay, so let's see. There was a question from Kishore. Can you tell about worm tea? What is it about worm tea that you would like to know? Worm tea is actually just, it's quite simple. It is where you use the worm casting to make a tea, where you soak the worm casting in water and then use it to water your plants. You can use it to water the foliage of your plants because adding it as a foliar spray to your plants will actually help with pest control. As I mentioned earlier in the live, that I actually did that when I saw that I started having white flies on my tomato plants this year, and I haven't seen any more of the white flies since I did that. So you can use it as a foliar spray for pest control, or you can use it to water your plants. There are several ways that you can actually make it. So you can add a small amount of worm casting. The amount of casting that you're going to be using to water depend on your preference and how much castings you have. So some recommend using a cup of casting to a liter of water or to a gallon of water. Some would put a liter of castings to a 5 gallon bucket of water. So there are various ratios that people use. So you can research that, look into the ratios that are used by many different gardeners to see which one you prefer. When you use whatever ratio you decide to use, it is a good idea to observe how your plants react to the ratio of castings to water to know whether you want to use more castings to a certain amount of water or you want to use less. Now, worm tea, you can make it either by simply putting the casting in water and letting it sit for 24 hours, or you can put it in the water and stir it occasionally. Or the best method yet is if you have a pump, like a water pump or stuff like that, make sure you secure the pump so that the castings cannot get directly into the pump or it will damage your pump. But put the pump into the solution, the castings with the water, and let it aerate it, because the more you aerate it, the more microbes that you're going to have in your worm tea, and the more powerful or the more potent your worm tea is going to be. Now, it is said that worm tea has a shelf life of 3 days. So, if you are going to make your worm tea, you want to make just enough that you're going to use within 3 days of making it, or else the worm tea will go bad. However, you can prolong the life of your worm tea if you are not going to be finishing it within 3 days by keeping it aerated. So, as long as you keep aerating it, it will remain potent, it will not lose its shelf life. Now, worm tea constantly is being confused with leachate. Worm leachate is actually where you water your worm bin, and that extra water that drains off of your worm bin and you use that in your garden. It's not the same as worm tea. They are similar, but the leachate will not really have as much nutrients in it as the worm tea will. But both of them can be used in your garden, but the worm tea will have far more nutrients in it. And the one thing that I always say to gardeners is that if you really have leachate, a lot of leachate coming out of your worm bin, it means you're adding way too much moisture to your bin. Let's see. Russell says the one you use for water in the winter. Okay. I got you, Russell. Yes. Okay. Thanks for that information. I will definitely look into the mosquito dung. So the mosquito dung will help to prevent me from having problems with pests in my worm bin if I put it into the water that I use for my worms in the winter. Let me see. And White says yes, she has a video on it on the worm tea. Oh, thanks, Ann White. Yes, I tend to fail to remember things like that. A lot of times, people ask about something, and I forget that I have a video that I can refer them to. So thanks for that reminder, Ann White. Let's see. Russell says, use the BTI in the water you use to water your plants and the water you use for worms. There will be, like Arnold says, terminated. Okay, yes, and that is our goal to have them all terminated. So, yes, thanks for that information, Russell. Yes. And you know, the BTI that I bought the other day when I was, oh, yes, I used the BTI, but I haven't used the BTK yet. I still have it. Yes, I think it's still out in the vehicle too. That's terrible, isn't it? I bought it, what, more than a month now, and I haven't even used it yet. But yes, the BTI, I'm definitely gonna have to get some more and start using them to help control the pest. Let's see. Kishore says, I will go through your videos. Share video links, please. Oh, okay. That is another weakness of mine. I don't really had links to my videos. I'm too busy. I'm gonna try to start doing that again because it's been quite a few months since I've done that. So I'm gonna have to try and start doing that again as soon as I get myself reorganized. Yes. But maybe Ann White can find the link and put it up on the in the chat for you for that video. I don't know. Depending on how busy she is. I don't know. Yes. Another point to jot down. Okay, so after the live, I'm gonna see if I can find those videos relating to the discussion and link them in the description section so you can have access to them. Let's see what it says. I usually use 1 teaspoon, 5 ml of finely ground BTI to 6 gallons of water. Okay, let me jot down that formula too. Okay, yes, that's great information you're sharing there, Russell. I'm definitely going to be using it and see what happens. Yeah, that will definitely help with the amount of those little flying creatures that I see flying around in my garden, in my worm farm. The good thing is that I have not seen so much of them since the summer started. I don't know if maybe because the weather is quite nice or warm enough, so they're not staying in the garage, but they might come back in the they might decide to come back in the winter. So definitely gonna have to get me some BTI. I'm gonna have to research the sizes size containers of BTI that's available. See if I can source them anywhere apart from these local suppliers, because the local suppliers, well, I don't know about garden centers. Maybe there I can find them in bulk, but places like Home Depot and Canadian Tires, it's just small quantities of these things that you can get. So I'm gonna have to see if I can find it in bulk. Okay, you're trying, but you can't share it on wide. Okay, no problem. Thanks for trying. Yes, after the live, I will just see if I can find those videos and share it at the link to the description. Okay, so if there are no further comments, then I'm going to be saying goodbye to you guys. Let's see. I ordered BTI from Amazon, mosquito dunks. Okay. Well, see, Amazon is my go-to place, so definitely going to check it out. Let's see. So let's see. And white. Oh, you're sharing the name of the video with Kishore. 3 ways to make compost tea. Yes. Thanks for that, and white. So you get the mosquito dunks from Amazon as well, Russell. I have so many things jotted down that I said I need to research, but I haven't had the chance to research them yet. Definitely going to have to do this one though, since as it is such vital information to secure my worm bins from those pests. Okay, have a lovely day to our healthy home. All the best to you. I hope the heat does not destroy any more of your plants. Stay safe. Okay, you are very welcome. Although I think it might be on white here, thank you. Yeah, so I'm gonna say goodbye to you guys. Yourself a lovely weekend, and all the best to you, Kishore, in getting those fungus gnats and fruit flies and other flies under control. Keep us up to date as to what's happening if you're successful in your attempt to get them under control. Thanks for your many questions and for participating in the live. For all of those who took part in the live in whatever way, whether by watching, commenting, asking questions, or sharing your experience. It was fun talking with you all. So enjoy your weekends. Oh, hi, Peggy. Just running through. Happy gardening to you too. Okay, same to you, my dear. Remember to add the videos to the description, please. Okay, yes, I will do my best to remember that. In fact, maybe I should do it as soon as I end the live so I don't forget. Thanks for the reminder. So until I see you again on Monday, take care. See if I find that. Same to you, Russell, and thank you.